Would like to say thank to all of you for getting up early this morning and for those watching on live stream. So we have a lot of information to get through on this panel, so we're going to skip the traditional, everyone go down the line and say who they are. Trust me when I say that these are some of the best experts in the field on technology and traffic safety, and that is our topic this morning. We've talked a lot over the past couple of days around behavior changes that are needed to bring the numbers down, but we haven't spent a ton of time talking about technology, and that's what this panel is all about. So to kick it off, we're going to start with a very perhaps simple question, which is technology is often a term that's used to describe a bunch of different things. It can mean everything from a seatbelt to something as advanced as level 2 automation. But we talk about it in terms of traffic safety as one of those things that we desperately need to address the safety problem. And so I'm going to have each one of these experts kind of address the core question is, you know, from their perspective, where have they seen technology actually help, and what were some of the things that led to it being helpful? So maybe we'll start on this end of the panel, just because it's easy for me to go to my right. And why don't you kick us off?
Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. My name is Justin Meyers. I'm the president of a company called BusPatrol. We're the largest automated enforcement company by camera deployment in the United States. We put camera systems and AI systems on school buses to enforce or assist law enforcement in enforcing illegal passes of school buses when the school buses stop signs deployed, and kids are getting off and on and off the bus. Prior to that, though, I spent 20 years in law enforcement, was head of public safety in New York City, and I remember spending a lot of my career looking at kind of index crime and violent crime. And one of the reasons that I chose to come to the private sector and work for a mission-driven organization like BusPatrol is that, you know, we take a lot of victory laps in law enforcement around reducing index crimes and violent crime in this country. But at the end of the day, guns kill 48,000 people a year, and cars kill 46,000 people a year. And we don't get the same type of focus or initiatives from government to focus on roadway safety at the same level we do violent crime in this country. And the big difference between violent crime and roadway safety is that we actually have technology that can prevent crashes and incidents on the roadway. We can actually change driver behavior when we ethically and correctly deploy technology onto our roadways. And so for me, I think automated enforcement and just camera systems in general create accountability. They change driver behavior when you bring to attention the act that received the ticket. And ultimately, you can really see over time when systems are deployed in a proper manner, ubiquitously across a community, you change behavior pretty dramatically, as much as 50 to 90% reductions in the type of behavior. And so for me, I think that ubiquitous deployment of roadway cameras and automated enforcement systems can be a really important piece of the puzzle for a community as they think about building out a proper roadway safety plan.
Yeah, really agree. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. I'm Stephanie Manning, Chief Government Affairs Officer for Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And the voice that I like to bring into the room is those who have been affected personally, victims and survivors. MAD does serve at no cost over 10,000 victims every year, providing support in various ways. And I think it's important to kind of remember the statistics that we all cite every day in our work are real families, real people. And each one of the tragedies that they continue to experience, the trauma they continue to experience, is entirely preventable. And after decades of incredible work by the law enforcement community, advocacy organizations that we partner with all the time, education efforts that still are very important to this day and have to continue, right? We have to pay attention to all of those programs, enforcement, education, et cetera, prevention. But we're at this really interesting moment in traffic safety where there is technology that can absolutely prevent most, if not all, of fatal crashes and serious injury crashes on our roadways. And I want to just share that, and I do want to get back to your question, that the first time Mothers Against Drunk Driving had a discussion with members of Congress and the auto industry and regulators regarding anti-drunk driving anti-drunk driving technology was 20 years ago, literally 20 years ago. Unfortunately, it's sort of hard to explain to victims and survivors why this stuff takes so long. What are the complexities and nuances for getting technology into vehicles? That's a really tough discussion to have. MAD typically worked on the behavioral side, the behavioral change side, and started tiptoeing into the vehicle safety side again about 20 years ago. And since then, we've learned a lot, right? Seatbelts and airbags and other vehicle safety features, getting back to your question, Nat, took decades to get into vehicles and took decades to get to a place where the public accepted that technology. Automakers were putting that technology in vehicles. Seatbelts save more than 15,000 lives every single year. And the technology that MAD is pushing, and MAD actually, Victims and Survivors, got a federal law enacted in 2021 that would require the Department of Transportation to create a standard for anti-drunk driving technology to be built into every new vehicle. It's passive, the driver doesn't have to do anything. It's very different than ignition interlocks, which are also a part of the solution and the tools in the toolbox. But if you think about seatbelts in the 80s, and a lot of the same arguments that were used against seatbelts back then, don't tread on me, don't tell me what to do, the government, stay out of my business. It's a lot of the same arguments that we've been facing with this technology. And over time, through some public education efforts, through law changes, now most of us can't imagine not wearing a seatbelt. We can't imagine not having airbags in our cars. We can't imagine not having rear view cameras, electronic stability control. It takes time, unfortunately, but we will get there. Technology will make it so that drunk driving is a thing of the past, that future generations couldn't believe we let go for so long. So technology is a real game changer for drunk driving and for all of traffic safety. I think it's a really interesting topic for this community to consider, how we get it deployed faster. What are the ways we can incentivize deployment and ultimately get the regulation that victims and survivors got into law through a bipartisan effort, how we get this technology on every new vehicle to stop this violent crime.
Yeah, having worked on that technology for a long time, it is great to see the progress, but man, we have a long way to go. Kit, why don't we go to your side and give us your perspective?
Sure. It's great to see everyone here. I'm Kit Delgado. I'm an emergency doctor at the University of Pennsylvania and a researcher. I got into this working in a trauma center and seeing night after night patients injured in horrific crashes and the kind of recurrent crashes that we see all the time. People who are telling us they're just stopped at a stoplight and someone just slams into the back of them. I probably see that almost every week. And what I realized in speaking to my patients is that everyone knows that these behaviors like texting while driving and drinking while driving are illegal and they shouldn't be doing them, but we consistently do these anyway. And so for the past 10 years, I've devoted myself to really understanding human behavior. I even became board certified in addiction medicine as well. And by applying insights from psychology, we can understand that the only thing that's predictable is that we're gonna willpower is not very effective. And so we began a research program partnering with insurance companies like Progressive, GM OnStar, and others to embed traffic safety interventions into their telematics program. So telematics is basically on your phone, the same technology that shows you, where you're going on your GPS, can track your phone use while driving, speeding, your hard braking, aggressive maneuvers, and the adoption of usage-based insurance is steadily increasing throughout the country and throughout the world. And right now, something like $2.5 to $4.5 billion are being applied for safe driving discounts. And so there's a huge market out there for incentivizing safety. And what we learned from our studies is that money is probably not being used effectively enough. And so for example, we've done 4 large randomized trials, kind of the best evidence out there. And we've shown sort of the current standard way of saying, hey, drive better, you'll get a discount, doesn't really work. But if you provide weekly feedback, you make it fun, you make it a game, have people compete against each other to try to reduce their phone use while driving, become aware of how much they're using their phone use while driving, you can reduce sustainably phone use while driving by at least 25 to 30%. And even after the study's over, we track that. We've now applied that to connected vehicles with GM OnStar. We consenting drivers from across the country participated in Snapchat type streaks where they were incentivized to keep their seatbelts on in a streak. And we showed that reduced unbuckled trips by 30%, even after we turned it off. So, the major take home is willpower is weak, and the more that you can automate and make it the right thing to do, the easy thing to do, the more likely you are to be successful.
Owen, why don't you wrap us up on this first question?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Owen McShane. I'm the Vice President of Government Relations for a company called FaceTec, which provides biometrics and ID verification. Prior to that, my job, I worked for New York State DMV for over 30 years, retiring as the Deputy Commissioner in charge of the Investigation Unit and the Highway Safety Office. With my involvement with highway safety and investigations, I was amazed at the amount of driver's license fraud we saw. In 2008, we initiated a facial recognition pilot in New York, and we were anticipating a lot of fraud issues. What we saw was more than 50% of the people we caught were creating a second identity to bypass convictions, DWIs, suspensions, and through the 15 years before I retired, that stayed within 1 percentage point. 50% of people we caught were using it to bypass suspensions or revocations as a result of alcohol or impairment. 30% of the individuals we caught were suspended or revoked under every identity they had, regardless of how many identities they had, and 20% were non-DMV issues. One of the things we did a lot of in New York was we identified the use of fake IDs and counterfeit driver's licenses, going to concert venues and other resources like that. And we get a list from our Department of Criminal Justice Services of the last drink location for everyone under the age of 21 who was arrested for a DWI or driving while the ability impaired. And we would target those locations. We walked into some bars, some concert venues where everyone in the facility was underage. Concert venues where every night they averaged a fatal crash with someone under 21 leaving until we started doing enforcement, and it dropped to 0. This past year, I had the opportunity to come to a concert venue right near here in Meriwether, Maryland, at a Luke Bryan concert. Working with Howard County that night, we recovered 252 fake driver's licenses being used, or a little more than 1% of the attendees presenting fake ID. And if you see underage drinkers, what they're doing is they're going in there and they're guzzling drinks as quickly as possible so they don't get caught doing it. But we also had 50 people using someone else's identity. So the company that I work for now has developed a technology that's getting pushed out to driver's licenses, police IDs, and other types of IDs that provides a free biometric link to an individual and that physical card. We've been providing it free to any DMVs in the country, any police agencies. We pushed it out now to over 5,000 police, fire, and EMT agencies who are adding it to their IDs. And we're working with about half a dozen DMVs right now to add it to their physical cards and other programs. Try to lock that person into one identity and also target some of the fake ID trends we're seeing.
It's really interesting. As I promised you all this morning, you can see just the variety of the technologies that we're talking about, all aimed at traffic safety from a bunch of different lenses. I found Owen's comment. I've heard Owen describe this story of fake IDs a couple of times now, and it's still amazing, even though it's like the 4th or 5th time I've heard you explain it. It's pretty remarkable. So, cost is always a topic of conversation. Whether you're a municipality or a consumer, cost is a thing that always gets equated with technology. There's an assumption that to have safety, you have to pay more. One of the things I think we wanted to do this morning is to just crack open that nut a little bit. You know, what is it about technology that we often say to get safety you have to pay extra for it? And maybe how do we collectively change the conversation on that? So this time we'll start with Kid, because I think ITS technologies in general are very broad, and so we can kind of explore this idea of how do we change the conversation and narrative around technology and safety and cost.
I think in terms of using usage-based insurance and telematics for safety, I think it's a huge untapped opportunity. As I mentioned, if basically the way it works is that if you sign up for insurance, you're often, most of the major companies now offer this. You get maybe a $50 discount for downloading an app which tracks your driving behavior and get a personalized rate on insurance. And if you're a safer driver, you actually save money. So it's good for the customers. The companies benefit too, because now they're better able to predict who's going to get into a crash, and they can price their insurance more competitively, and they improve their profit loss ratios, and they also hold on to engaged drivers. People tend to overestimate how good of a driver they are, so there'll be some unsafe drivers in there as well. But everyone wins here. The companies win because they can, rather than sort of looking at your average demographics and where you live, they can give you a better rate and make more money. The customers win because they're paying less. And the good thing is that right now, like I mentioned, something like $2.5 to $4.5 billion are being put out there in safe driving discounts. So it's already funded. It's just a question of how are we going to use that money more effectively to be more motivational. And what we've proven in our several studies is that we can stretch the motivational value of that money further if we combine it with recurrent feedback, gamification, and insights from behavioral economics. And so what I'd like to see is this approach be scaled up across all our insurance companies as this type of insurance takes off. So it's self-funding, which is great.
Yep. Owen.
So as I mentioned, the technology that my company provides, we provide it free to any government or nonprofit. But in terms of facial recognition, one of the things I saw when I was with New York DMV is the amount of grant money that was available from our partners at NHTSA, Federal Motor Carrier. So during the time I managed the facial recognition program, our total expenditure was $13.5 million to maintain the system, servers, and everything else. The state of New York paid less than $50,000 for that. The rest was funded with grants. And the way we got the grant was using traffic safety data. So we would have the Institute for Traffic Safety Management, part of the State University of New York, analyze the driving histories of everyone we caught. And we found that people with multiple licenses were 5 or 6 times more likely not to wear their seatbelt, be involved in fatal crashes, have speed convictions on their records. They were 4 times more likely to have alcohol convictions on their records. So when we got that data, we were able to use that for getting grants from these different entities, and it really helped get a lot of bad drivers off the road and hold them accountable for past infractions as well.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about your answer is one of the underlying assumptions, I think, is people think that the police and EMS is all free when they show up to a crash scene. I think that's obviously not true. There's cost involved with that. And so if you can save those resources, there is kind of a cost benefit as well. Justin, I think one of the things in this kind of family of folks, automated enforcement gets a bad rap sometimes, depending on who you're talking with. Is it a revenue source for the state or the municipality? How have you dealt with this sort of cost versus technology versus safety question?
Yeah, I mentioned when I spoke before around kind of the ethics of deploying automated enforcement. I think there's a really delicate balance with your intention, how you roll it out, and what the goals are, and how you kind of measure success with automated enforcement. I think historically there have been some companies who've partnered with government, done a good job. I think there's others that have not done a good job. And that's a really negative impact generally to the broader community. So the way that we think about it is, I think a lot of corporations have a fiduciary responsibility to shareholders to maximize profit, right? We're not a publicly traded company, so we're able to be focused on mission first. And so the kind of the difference is that if you're going to do, let's say, speed cameras or red light cameras, and you go into a community and you do a traffic study and you say, this is where the most speeding happens, this is where the most violations happen, and you put cameras only there, the goal is to generate revenue then. It's not to change driver behavior. I think ubiquitous deployment of automated enforcement coupled with education to drivers and very kind of loud announcements to the public around here's how violations work, here's how to not get a ticket, and here's your responsibility, being very clear with drivers, and again, ubiquitous deployment. So one of the things that we do, we don't do a traffic safety study to determine which school buses are going to give out tickets. We deploy on every single school bus in a community, whether that school bus is ever going to make a stop or not. So some school buses for like special needs children drive directly to that child's house, pick them up in their driveway, drive them directly to school. They're never going to make a stop. But we'll still put that technology on that school bus to make sure that every kid at every stop, every time is protected. But then you have to mirror that with an education campaign to make sure that drivers understand that every school bus in your community has this technology. And if you do that, if you kind of mirror those two things together, the education and the enforcement, that's where you start to drive behavior change, right? Because everybody has sped at least once in their life, right? But no one ever speeds when they see the police officer 200 yards down the road, right? Everyone slams on their brakes. Because if you know that the technology is there to hold you accountable, to the doctor's point, like you're going to change your behavior once you're kind of cognitively aware of it. And so I believe that one, education, two, being very transparent about the intention and how the system works, and having that two-way communication with your constituency, and then that education component along with enforcement is really, really critical to building trust. Because to your point, at the end of the day, if you're going to raise your hand as a private company and ask for the awesome responsibility in either outsourcing a function of government or sharing in the responsibility of public safety, that fiduciary responsibility that the elected officials in the community has to their constituency flows through to you as an organization as well. And so really, I think at bottom, the answer to your question is it's how you show up. It's how you partner with communities. It's how you build trust. And it's how you ensure that your system is being deployed in a way that is really for the public good and with intention to actually change behavior, not just to drive revenue.
Yeah, well said. Steph, why don't you wrap us up?
So again, the victim survivor perspective, sort of bringing that to the table. Drunk driving, just drunk driving, costs this country every year $280 billion. $280 billion. And I think we have to do a better job of sort of breaking that down and reminding legislators, regulators, the public that these are costs that are just accepted along with the level of death and injury that happens on our roadways every day. And I think if we were to look at any other sector of transportation, this would never be accepted, right? Whether that's rail, aviation, it just would never happen. We in this country, I think, have just become complacent. And again, technology provides this really unique opportunity to go to zero, truly. Cost is something that we've been hearing a lot about as we look to get anti-drunk driving tech included, built into every new vehicle, which will happen one day. And we're going to start seeing the tech deployed in the next couple of years in Europe and here. I think that when you're coming at it from a victim survivor perspective of somebody whose life has been totally put upside down communities who have been impacted, families and communities, not just one or two individuals. I think putting it into perspective that some of the technology we're talking about literally costs $1 a car for a software upgrade on a driver monitoring system that may already be on a vehicle, has to be on every vehicle this year in Europe. There are algorithms for intoxication that you could literally upload to existing technology to determine if a driver is drunk. Now, is it perfect? Can it determine at 0.08 BAC every time? We're getting there, right? And could you set the threshold slightly higher until the tech is perfect, right? The answer is yes, because every day we wait, 34 more people are killed in drunk driving crashes, and we've got to get the technology deployed now. To hear the cost argument when we're hearing from suppliers $1 a vehicle, it just doesn't hold up, especially when you look at how much drunk driving alone costs this country in real dollars. So it's a tough argument, I think, for us to hear as we hear about the real costs of the technology today.
Yeah, I think as a recovering regulator, the cost thing is something that is very, very real, and I just think about consumers are willing to pay, what is it, $250 a pop for a pair of AirPods that, my kids are on their third pair, I think, each, which is frustrating, compared to some of the costs that we're talking about for vehicle technology. I don't think it's up there on the screen, but this is one of the few panels that we're actually going to try to get some questions, so please text that number, and I'll look at it up here. Maybe picking up on this point, and you mentioned it earlier, Steph, around like the seatbelts back in the day and how long it took to get ubiquitous. So I'm going to make a statement. You could agree or disagree, but I would argue that the vehicles that we have today and the roads that we have today are, as safe as they've ever been. Certainly compared to 20 years ago. And yet, we look at the numbers and they're just not moving, or at least not moving as much as we thought they should. I'm going to ask each of you to kind of give your perspective on why you think that is. Is it really just behavior, or what else is going on? So Steph, we'll start with you.
Well, again, focused on drunk driving, people drive drunk because they can, right? And you can't enforce your way out of the entire problem. I mean, law enforcement serve as the front lines. They do an incredible job, and we've seen some dip in the numbers in recent years with enforcement coming back after COVID when it dipped, and that's fantastic. But we still have nearly 12,000 people being killed in drunk driving crashes alone, and nearly 400,000 serious injuries. It's a mystery, right? After 45 years of victims and survivors putting the face on the statistics and working in their local communities and states and federally to really get at this problem, why we're still here talking about it when there is technology today that can solve this problem. And we've got to continue, again, to keep doing the things that work, to support law enforcement, to support education efforts in our community, to talk about the costs involved in these crashes. But I think there really has to be the political will, right? And several industries coming together, the auto industry, the alcohol industry, and the insurance industry, who we partner with in various ways. But getting these industries to the table together with advocates, with public health and traffic safety, with our communities is really key to moving this forward. And, to your point, public acceptance has to be talked about, right? We've got to get messages to the public to say, this is why this technology is good for everybody involved. Here's how it's going to protect you, your family, and your communities. So I just think we have to keep pushing and calling for technology solutions in addition to everything we've been doing for decades. Some of it has worked really well, but we've hit this point where it's not going to get us to zero, right? And there are companies and organizations and governments every day that say zero is our goal, right? You look on every website of every company that operates in our space, zero is our goal. We're not going to get there without anti-drunk driving technology built into every vehicle. It just won't happen. So I think having the will to get it done, getting everybody together at the table, convening, and we've been talking about the same roadblocks for 20 years. to implementing this technology, really sitting down and coming up with solutions to just start getting the tech deployed. And one thing I'll just add before I wrap up, I want to just give a shout out to the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. At MAD's 45th anniversary in September, we had hundreds and hundreds of victims and survivors in DC on Capitol Hill with technology providers who have created and continue to create incredible technology to stop drunk driving. We all gathered, and there was a really big announcement by David Harkey, the head of the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, who said by or before 2030, we at the Institute are going to include drunk driving prevention technology in our Top Safety Picks Plus rating program. That's huge. That means in this country, we are going to see deployment of this technology in the next few years. That's really exciting, and I think is going to lead to, at some point, we would hope sooner rather than later, this tech being on every single car across the country. So I just want to give a huge shout out to the Insurance Institute for the work they're doing to promote this. They had the will and the leadership to really move this forward in a way that's going to save lives and prevent injuries.
Yeah, and I think folks will be able to hear from David Harkey a little bit later this morning, so please come back for that. Justin, what about you? What's your perspective on this question?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's a really disturbing fact. When I was in New York in 2021, it was one of the most disheartening things you could ever see when you looked at the statistics around just pedestrian deaths on roadways. After 20 years of Vision Zero work in the largest city in this country and literally billions of dollars spent on that effort, we were at a 20-year high coming out of COVID. I don't have like a statistic that I can lean on and say like this is why we continue to move that way, but I do have a couple of opinions. At the end of the day, what kills on the roadway? It really comes down to generally one of two things, speed or distraction. And distraction can come in a lot of different forms. It can be intoxication, it can be your cell phone. But if everybody was driving at 10 and 2 sober at 20 miles an hour, we'd probably be at 0. And so if you kind of look over us as a society more than just roadway safety, we're moving a lot faster and we're a lot more distracted. And there's more and more, I think, acceptance of antisocial behavior, generally speaking, kind of less care about the collective whole than maybe we had 20 or 30 years ago. And when you kind of add all of those things up, people are in a little bit more of a hurry, a little bit more distracted, less compassion for your fellow person on the roadway, and population densities growing at the same at paces we really haven't seen before. You know, you go to a lot of major cities in this country. I'll pick one random one, Austin, Texas. If you look at like population in Austin, Texas 15 years ago to today, it's like 5-6 times the size, and especially if you can include the greater MSA. But the roads are exactly the same, right? And so you have like far more people, far more congestion, far more people on the roadways, far more people because of a lot of the work we've done on Vision Zero, biking, walking, right? So you have more people, more pedestrians on the roadway than we've had in years past. Just all of those factors combined is creating a lethal cocktail in this country that is costing people their lives. And so I think, you know, the answer is like fairly simple. Like we need intention and we need action, right? I mean, the solutions are there, as I think we've all kind of noted. The solutions exist. Like we can actually change driver behavior, right? If you implemented all these different types of technology that we're talking about, and you just take the option away. I always use the example of, a lot of people don't realize this, but it was only in 1969 that you weren't allowed to bring a gun on an airplane. And commercial air traffic started in 1928. So for 41 years, you could go to the airport with a pistol in your pocket and get on a plane and fly from most airports. And in 1969 is the first recorded time that someone was arrested in an airport for trying to bring a firearm on an airplane, right? And from 69 to 72, like a whole bunch of people got arrested for trying to bring guns on an airplane, and not because they had any malintent, but because it was just allowed. But then you fast forward to today, no one would dream of trying to bring a gun intentionally onto an airplane unless you had malintent, right? And so it does become socially acceptable to deploy certain technologies that create restrictions on the public's behavior for the greater good of the whole. And I think one of the greatest obstacles we have in this country, to your point, is social acceptance of those things. And you look across the world, you look at Europe, you look at Asia, you look at other advanced countries, we are lagging behind dramatically in social acceptance of technologies that are life-saving or society-changing technologies. And I'll just close with this, because I actually think that this is one of the greatest threats that we have as a country, is the social acceptance of advanced technology. If you look at high-speed rail, right, Europe, Asia have interconnected every major city in their continents over the last 30 years with high-speed rail. We haven't built a single lane mile in any type of significant way. And the problem is that today we've priced ourselves out of that infrastructure. It's just cost way too much money to build high-speed rail today. It's just not going to happen at this point. It would cost the GDP of a large European country just to connect the thoroughfares on the east and west coast of the United States. That same thing is going to happen with technology as a whole, roadway safety and public safety technology. We're going to price ourselves out. The cost of a RAM chip has gone up about 400x in the last 12 months. And that's going to continue as the rest of the world buys these technologies and buys cameras and deploys them and does all of this stuff. The cost is going to rise. And we're going to be sitting here with a lack of social acceptance and a lack of investment into these technologies, and we're going to price ourselves out of being a 21st century technological power that utilizes technology for public safety. And I think that's going to create a chasm between our country and the rest of the world that may be too large to overcome.
Yeah, that's really well stated. How about you, Owen? Why don't you start this way?
So one of the things I've seen similar to what you were talking about is the surge in negative behaviors after COVID. Working in DMV, the amount of tickets that we saw drop during COVID, the amount of speeds that we saw on the highways skyrocketed, record highs, record speeds for motorcycles, cars, through work zones, school zones, etc. We also saw a lot of new vehicles entering the market, entering the roadways, from e-bikes to different types of mobility devices, and some of the challenges of just dealing with those. I was engaged in an enforcement detail on the Triborough Bridge, and an e-bike was coming over at 70 miles an hour, weaving through traffic, no plates, no helmets, and was stopped as part of our enforcement detail. And the debate was, what could we ticket the person for? It's not classified as a motor vehicle. It is on a public roadway. You know, it was challenging. But drivers are not used to an e-bike whizzing by at 30, 40 miles an hour. And we're starting to see that not just in New York, but around the country. Over the past year, I've had the opportunity to travel a lot in Europe. And the reaction to drinking, you don't get behind the wheel after you have a drink. It's just not socially acceptable there. And a lot more responsibility, a lot more integration of the devices and detection devices in the vehicles. And we're seeing that in a whole different way. And it's just something that different types of behavior adapting. I also teach part-time at University of Albany, and I teach classes on cybersecurity, counterterrorism, and biometrics. And one of the requirements is put your phones away when you come in the classroom. Class is typically an hour and a half. It's almost like an addiction seeing some of the students trying to migrate back to pull their phones out. So I can't imagine what those same students would be like behind the wheel of a car driving. If they can't focus for 5 minutes, 10 minutes without the phone, how are they going to get by behind the wheel? And I think it's a combination of technology. There's a lot of technology out there that will help stop this. Enforcement is needed in this as well, and just communication about what's out there. You know, getting a lot of the data and sharing it back with the communities has really resulted in a lot of positive change that way. But I think more of that data is needed, and the more we can work together, the more we can accomplish.
Yeah, I think there is a point that you made there that's really important about the attention span And I would not just put the college kids in that realm. I think some of us adults suffer from the same thing. And I think on the e-bike thing, I'm sure many of us in the audience walking back and forth to the hotels have nearly been clipped by somebody going by on one of these scooters. And I'm sure Dr. Delgado could tell us many stories in the ER about heads and wrists and all sorts of things being broken. But you get to wrap up this question.
Yeah, I think it's a mindset problem. I think we need to stop designing for the driver that we wish we had and actually design for the driver that we have. And
Good point.
we, as Justin and Stephanie and Owen mentioned, the drivers that we have now are more distracted. It's a compounding problem once you add alcohol. The effects kind of combine together for worse outcomes. And so I think a lot of our investment is in educational campaigns and PSAs, and I think that's really important for establishing social norms, but it's really not going to be effective for overall behavior change. And we need to actually change the systems and the roadways and the infrastructure that drivers drive in and the vehicles so that they don't get into crashes. And so I would propose kind of like 3 ladders beyond just the educational awareness. So the first would be motivating drivers and providing feedback to make people more aware of their behaviors, their speeding, their aggressive driving, their distraction. How can we do that? I think, as I mentioned, usage-based insurance and telematics is an opportunity for scale that's only growing. There are some states, I think one state like California, it still doesn't allow usage-based insurance, so it's an opportunity, a large state there where a law could be passed to enable that. Places like Italy have passed laws to ensure that insurers always offer a usage-based policy in addition to a regular policy, just to increase the availability. And then not just offering the policies. Right now we're wasting money by delivering these discounts ineffectively, but actually making tweaks to the programs from the evidence that we've generated to make them more effective for changing behavior. I think the next rung up from that is the technology, like Justin was mentioning, with automated enforcement, buses, but there's several states, I think like 15 to 20 states that where there's policies that are not enabling speeding cameras and red light cameras. The evidence shows that we could reduce thousands upon thousands of crashes and reduce deaths from that. And then ignition interlocks. I think our team at Penn published a paper maybe about 10 years ago showing that we could save about 3,000 lives per year if we scaled up ignition interlock laws for first-time offenders across the country. I think since that time there's been about 10 new states that have adopted them, but there's something like 15 to 20 states that still have not adopted ignition interlock laws, so that's a key part. And then the final tier is what Stephanie was mentioning with embedding technology into vehicles to, for the general public that just is automatically going to detect impairment and reduce the ability to drive the car. I also participated in a panel on National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, Medicine, where we looked at, spent a whole year looking at all the evidence around, what could reduce mortality from alcohol-impaired driving, and we concluded that, the BAC limit of 0.08 is too high, and that it should be 0.05. I know there's political challenges there, but there is an opportunity for that, and so that was our top recommendation from that study. So still opportunities. Just we haven't implemented the solutions that we know will work.
Yeah, I think the message from all of you is we can't rest on our laurels, basically. Yes, we have safe vehicles and safe roads than we had 20 years ago, but that's probably not the right way to measure ourselves. So as we wrap up here, one of the things that Lifesavers is known for is leaving folks with things they can do now, today in their communities. So maybe Kit, we'll start with you. Based on the conversation that we've had, what is your kind of takeaway to the audience on something they can do now?
But I think it's what I just was speaking about, advocating for those system solutions that are kind of designed for the drivers that we actually have. So certainly increasing education will help, but I think if you're in an area that doesn't have automated enforcement for red light cameras and speeding and those kinds of local things that are going to change the situation that people are driving in, that's where I double down and put my effort into.
Owen?
So I talked a little bit about what we did with facial recognition. I met with most of the DMVs across the country, and I'm amazed that many of them get the data of people having multiple licenses, and they don't do anything with it. They correct the DMV records, but they might just delete a record. So they could be deleting records that have offenses on it instead of addressing it. And I know it's a big effort to do so, but to me, I think it's worthwhile to hold the people accountable for their actions. Multiple states, especially in the Northeast, are aware of it, but are taking limited action. So as states start moving forward, I think that's a valuable tool for them to get some bad drivers off the road. And I think the technology that's out there in the cars, there's a lot more that is being underutilized. Utilizing it properly, I think it really also help in keeping our drivers safe.
Well said. Steph?
All right, I've got a good one for everybody.
You only get one.
I only get one. I've got a long list. First of all, is Ian Goldstein in the room from my team? There he is, right back there. Here's what I'm going to ask. If you are from, this is very specific, if you are from Kentucky or Ohio, please go see Ian. Because we, even though we got this bipartisan law done, the Honoring the Abbas Family Legacy to Terminate Drunk Driving, named after a family of 5 who was killed in a wrong-way drunk driving crash. The driver was 4 times the legal limit. That mother, father, 3 children should still be here. The reason that that family was so instrumental in helping us get this done is they were from Detroit, the capital of the auto industry in this country. And we got the whole Michigan delegation, who tends to represent a lot of the auto industry's views in Congress, engaged because they knew that family. And there were 7,000 people at that funeral. And the sister of the woman killed really lobbied hard with us and thousands of other victims and survivors to get this law enacted, requiring anti-drunk driving tech on all cars. So the point is, we have a couple of members of Congress. I'll name one of them, Representative Massey from Kentucky, who has repeatedly brought up amendments on the House floor to defund or weaken the Halt Drunk Driving Act. He characterizes the law in a completely inaccurate way, doesn't talk about it with respect to drunk driving, and talks about it in terms of government overreach. The government is going to shut down your car if they don't like the way you drive. That's how he talks about it. So if you are from Kentucky, talk to Ian or me, and we'd love to kind of get you on our advocacy list. There's also a senator from Ohio who is talking about cost issues, going back to one of Nat's questions, talking about safety features as a problem because of cost, which safety features are not the reason that the cost of vehicles have gone up in recent years, even a little. So we have just a couple, very small minority of members on the fringe who are continuing to fight us. We are probably going to have another amendment fight this year. Get on MAD's website, sign up for our action alerts or our advocacy network, and help us make sure this law stays in place. I promise you, because of victims and survivors, the law will stay in place. The question is, how long will it take to get implemented? But we're not going to stop until anti-drunk driving tech is on every vehicle, and all of you in the room can help by letting your members of Congress know that you support ending drunk driving through passive in-vehicle technology. I won't keep going, Nat, but I could.
No, but that was great, and I think before we get to Justin, I think Stephanie's just highlighting one particular area, but if you think about some of the challenges that we all talk about in the community, You know, there's a group of folks that hate automated enforcement. There's a group of folks that hate sobriety checkpoints. The list is long. And so I think getting engaged with your local representative cannot be understated.
Absolutely.
Man, is Stephanie on point with her talking points, or what? She's like, she is there. I would kind of echo similarly what she's saying. I'll just start by saying thank you to all of you. This is an enormous room of folks and an enormous conference of people who are genuinely passionate about a really important issue. And my first mentor used to say, 90% of success is just showing up. I think he stole that from somebody else. I don't think it was his line, but Woody Allen, yes. But 90% of success is just showing up. And after 20 years of working in government, there's a lot of truth to that. Being the folks that show up, being the folks that advocate, that is where a lot of the success comes from. And so I would say thank you to all of you for continuing to show up and to fight for all of these important issues that just frankly, the general public is not as focused as they should be around how important these topics are. But showing up isn't just enough. And I think that there's like another unlock to trying to get government to move much quicker. Because at the end of the day, I think we're all kind of talking about the same similar issues, which is like the technology exists, the desire to preserve and protect life exists, but like we don't see the movement that we need to, and it takes far too long. And unfortunately, even with strong advocacy, even if this entire room stood up and collectively went and marched down to DC and started banging on doors, the way that government works, and for those of you who are big advocates, you know this all too well, is the way that caucuses work and leadership works and votes work. It can be really challenging to get even common sense measures that actually have the collective agreement from the elected body. It can be hard to get legislation to move or get a decision to be made by government. And one of the things that I find to be the unlock in my experience over 20 years inside of government and now on the outside trying to help move government in the right way is you have to not just advocate for your position, but you have to really think very strategically around what are the roadblocks? What are the reasons why this takes 20 years? What are the reasons why my local city doesn't adopt these type of policies? Maybe it's financial, and you have to create interesting ways to kind of pay for the thing that you're looking for. Maybe it's a political issue. Maybe it's political cover. Whatever it might be, you know, it's kind of negotiating 101, right? Like solve for your counterpart's problem, and you will get what you want. And so I think that when we advocate, oftentimes we get very focused on the issue that we care deeply about and should be, and because passion moves rooms. But we also have to recognize the decision makers and what are the roadblocks that this city council is going to have, that this mayor, how is this politically palpable or not for the mayor, and how can we create a scenario where it's a win for them? How do we get this elected body to push for this particular issue, and how do we solve for the politics of this particular caucus or this particular state and create a bipartisan agreement? Really thinking about it from their perspective and solving for whatever the roadblocks are consistently and focus every day on chopping through those roadblocks opposed to just advocating and solving the problems of the local officials or government officials. By doing that, I think you can create a little bit of kind of some gravity towards and momentum towards the issue that you're ultimately advocating for.
Well said. I think we did get one question on public acceptance, but we're going to have to, I think, park it there just due to time. As I started out saying, we were going to cover a lot of ground, and hopefully we did not disappoint. I think there's a lot of work we can all do, and I think that last question was really meant to have us all just recognize we all have a kind of a big role in this thing that we're trying to do. So. With that, please join me in thanking these wonderful people who took time to share their thoughts with us this morning. And then we'll get you off to the rest of the sessions, and then please don't miss the closing plenary. So hope everybody enjoyed the conversation.